Number 2 over here.
Ready for an out-of-this-world learning experience? Join us on June 6th for Intergalactic Learn with the Nerds Day. A full day of sessions covering Power Platform, Power BI, Azure, and more, featuring the Pragmatic Works team, plus special guests from Microsoft. The day will be filled with giveaways, swag, and special offers. Plus, on June 7th, enjoy 24 hours of complete access to our Learn with the Nerds streaming platform. This is a rare opportunity to check out all of our courses for free. Register now for Intergalactic Learn with the Nerds Day and elevate your skills to the next level.
All right. Hello. My name is Mitchell Pearson here at Pragmatic Works. I'm excited to introduce Jason Himmelstein, who's going to be presenting for us on the future of Power BI, which is perfect timing to follow up on exactly what we were just talking about with Fabric and how that's going to relate to that with the session from Brad Schatt. Jason is a principal program manager on the Power BI customer advisory team, also known as the Power BI CAT team at Microsoft. He is a former Microsoft MVP in Office apps and services, as well as the data platform, and a former Microsoft regional director with more than 25 years of experience working in the micro ecosystem. Jason has successfully architected solutions for customers of all sizes and maintains an active speaking schedule, addressing conferences literally around the world. He is also the co-host of the Bifocal Show podcast. So lots of great information on there. I've listened to a couple of them. They're really good. Jason is the author of the O'Reilly book for developing business intelligence apps for SharePoint. Outside of this crazy working world, he is the father of 2 awesome dudes, a diehard Texas Longhorns and San Antonio Spurs fan. And I don't know if he's diehard, but I have a feeling he likes the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. And then one question that everybody wants to know, Jason, as you transition into your session, pineapple or no pineapple on your pizza?
Well, so I'm not a huge carnivore. So for me, lots of veggies on the pizza. So I am a pineapple guy. So there are lots of folks who like to disagree with that, and that's okay. If you want to drop now, I'll understand. It's how I roll. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present today. I'm going to switch over and make sure that my screen gets seen here. So if y'all notice I'm looking off to the right, I want to make sure that we get the right screen resolution. So I have you off to my right here for the presentation. And as we go, I will try and answer as many questions as I can as we're going here. So Brad, I love Brad to death, but he stole all the good thunder, So we made our big Fabric announcements. It feels like it's been a month ago because I've lived a lot since then. I was in Germany when we did the announcement at Build. I was speaking at a conference over there called European Collaboration Summit with 2,500 people, and I got to be a part of the keynote while I was there. But unfortunately, the timing didn't work out, so I didn't get to talk about any of the cool Fabric stuff. Being a Power BI guy, I've been in this space for, as Mitchell mentioned, 25 years. I've been doing this Microsoft-y thing. I was a Power BI MVP. I was an Office Apps and Services MVP, which translates roughly to SharePoint and Power BI. Those are my particulars. Please feel free to reach out to me after this. Connect with me on LinkedIn, find me on Twitter, listen to the Bifocal Show. John White is my co-host on that, as well as my co-presenter at a lot of conferences. And we do this podcast roughly every week, talking about what's new with Power BI. So when this opportunity came up, my colleague Patrick LeBlanc reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I said, absolutely. These folks are, from my hometown in Jacksonville. I grew up, spent 19 years in Jacksonville. I was there when we got the Jags. So yes, Mitchell, I am a diehard Jags fan. In fact, I'll be coming back to Jacksonville for a home game this year because my youngest son has decided that for his bar mitzvah, that was what he wanted. He wanted dad to take him to a Jags home game at the bank. Now, as I mentioned before, love my two dudes, love to travel. I leave out next week, start going back on the road to do more of these conferences. But so the topic here is what is new with Power BI. And I want to cover off some slides, and then hopefully we'll have some time to get some demo as well. But we've been on this mission now to empower every user, right? That's the mission. That's what we've been trying to do from a Power BI perspective. And if we take Fabric aside from all of this, and we look at it from an analytics only perspective, which is very difficult to do for me, because I joined Microsoft just over a year ago. And when I joined Microsoft, it was all about Fabric. Right. So it's going to be all of the cool things that we're doing. And I'll talk a little bit about how Power BI plays with Fabric, because what we've done really is we've made all of these other awesome services more like Power BI. So that was what you were hearing from Brad earlier, is all the SaaSification therein. Power BI has been there for a long time. So let's talk about what's important to a user, right? Because that's what we're focused on when it comes to Power BI, is how do we bring data to every user? And we look at it from a number of different ways, right? So we want things to be instantly familiar. So how do we make Power BI the PowerPoint for data? That's one of the goals. So if you've been using Power BI recently, and hopefully you're staying up to date with the latest desktop, hopefully you're using it in the service, what you're noticing is we're doing a lot more to make Power BI like PowerPoint. We're doing this lock object thing, and I was just building out some reports just before this, so that hopefully we'll get a chance to get there, and I'll be able to show you Julia Child style some pre-baked reports that I just built 15 minutes ago against a direct lake model, direct lake mode. But we're trying to make this a lot easier for users to come to Power BI from the experiences they already know. So one of those is this on-object model. We changed the visualization field well. We've changed a whole bunch of things in the service over the course of the past year to 18 months, and we got some pushback on some of it. And like, why in the world are you moving my cheese? It's like, I am personally, I don't know about any of the rest of y'all, I am a by rote kind of a guy. My mouse moves exactly the right amount in order for me to do the right function. I'm a keyboard shortcuts person. I want to do things as efficiently as possible. To quote my boss, I'm not lazy, I'm efficient. Okay. So I want to do things, and all of a sudden we're moving stuff around on you. Well, part of the reason for doing that is to give this new on-object experience. As I was saying, I just was building a couple of reports, and I was copying stuff over from one report to another, which you can do very easily. And I was finding, man, I've gotten so used to an object model, I didn't know where to find things in the different wells that were not like the on-object model. And I was playing with all this. I was like, I want to make sure that I'm being able to describe this the right way. Took me, when I started playing with the on-object model, about a day and a half to get completely immersed, and there's no way I can ever go back. But other things that we're trying to get to, and some of these are roadmap items I'm going to talk to you about. Some of them are already in market, so the on object is already there. It's in preview. In order to do that, in order to get to that object, is in desktop only today. You do need to go to File, Options and Settings, Options, and go to Preview Features in order to turn on all the really great stuff. Now, if you're following along, you saw the new drop that came out alongside of Build features. And I'll tell you, next month, we're bringing even more. We're bringing some really great developer mode stuff you're going to want to be going in there and turning this stuff on. But this particular stuff is still to come. And all of these things that we're doing are building upon in order to get us to this point. So the co-authoring and enhanced visuals we are bringing out, I think maybe we'll start to see some of those visuals dropping over the summer. We've got a guy on our team called Miguel Myers, who is an absolute maestro and has been working with his team to revamp our visuals and bring out native visuals that are more beautiful and more accessible and easier to use, as well as we are working on web and Mac clients. Oh my goodness, everybody's been talking about this. We are looking to bring a great opportunity. Now, I'm sure the chat's probably blowing up right now, but I can't.
Hey, Jason, sorry to interrupt.
Mode
can you hear
here.
me?
But I can, Devin. Hi.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure if there's anything that can be done. We're just getting a little bit of shaky connection right now. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. I'm not sure if there's anything that can be changed to remedy that, but just want to give you a heads up.
Well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and let's stop the screen sharing for just a minute. Let's see if there's anything else I can turn off on my machine here that might help. I think
You
it's
sound
just,
great right now,
unfortunately, there's a storm that blew in. Do I?
Yeah. At the moment,
Well,
right now,
that's
you sound
rather
really good.
interesting. I wonder if it's because of...
I said, at the moment, you sound really good. Let's go ahead and roll.
All right. So I will go back to presentation mode then. But thank you for telling me. Let's see if I can share my screen again. Yes, I have two monitors. We're going to go back into the screen sharing, folks. I do apologize. All right. So hopefully you're seeing my screen again and you're able to hear me. So I'm going to go ahead and move it right along a little bit here. Now, everybody has heard at this point about these new AI type of features. Let's go back one more. There's a whole lot that Power BI has inside the box today. The decomposition tree, which helps us get to root cause analysis. We have Q&A in market, a whole bunch of different things, the natural language measuring authoring, the key phrase extraction, all the smart narratives. Those are all there in product today. And there's even more coming. You've heard the announcements around Copilot. Lots of stuff happening in that space, a lot of private previews, very limited private previews that are going on right now. And we're still, working towards those things and driving that. Hopefully more towards the later half of this year, we'll be opening those experiences up. But today, from a Power BI perspective, a lot of very limited private previews happening. Now, the mobile experience that we have, there's the whole data and space thing that's out there, but lots of stuff happening in the mobile space as well. For those of you who have executives who want to be able to see things on the go, we've brought a lot of great things in, whether it's the metrics side of things or just standard Power BI reports. We've given you lots of better authoring experiences as well, and we've got lots of downloads on this app and very high ratings. So we're very proud of that fact. But when we talk about things, to me, Power BI is more about how we share information with teams, right? It's not just about an individual. It's about how do we share with other people. And so once we get to it, we're working on building into Teams, Outlook, and the Microsoft 365 hub world. So we want to be able to make Power BI a first-class citizen and a single click away from data type of experience. So as we look at these things, we want to build into the activity feed all of these great things that you're starting to see from a Power BI perspective, and really make it more accessible, more findable for you, so that when you're in Teams, you can get to that data and be able to even comment on that data and integrate where you work a lot easier, and be able to do things like going into goals here, metrics, and be able to make these things just a little bit easier for you to leverage. We've also built it into meetings, and we're trying to make this a lot easier for you to be able to do. But the really big one for me was when we announced built into OneDrive and SharePoint, we are now able to open Power BI and visualize, and we're even able to go in, and there's a whole edit tape capability that we have backing Power BI in SharePoint and OneDrive. Personally, I'm a Power BI desktop guy, and being able to go in, selecting Power BI from a OneDrive or SharePoint location, be able to author that and be able to work with that really fast, save it back off. With everybody using known folder move these days, we all are saving into Power BI, and they're saving our Power BI files into OneDrive and SharePoint already. So lots of great stuff there. And because it's all built into the Office substrate side of things, Power BI content becomes discoverable, it becomes searchable, and it becomes just like every other Office document. And especially now that we have the ability to go ahead and do this open in place, makes it a heck of a lot easier. The other one that we've done, and this one came out back and went to GA, is the ability to go ahead and put put Power BI into PowerPoint and make it interactive. And this is something that I love when I go out and do workshops. This is something that John and I do on a regular basis, is go ahead and pop in something in Power BI report directly into our PowerPoint. So we're presenting live data out of a Power BI report, and you're not having to go, well, let me go find that information for you. Let me go back, let me go take a few minutes, and let me get the information. No, right here in the PowerPoint presentation that you're presenting to your leadership, you can click in, drill in, and get to the insights behind the data that you're seeing on the screen. So really powerful stuff here. All right, I wanted to take a pause here and make sure, how are we doing on the sound? Are we okay? Are y'all still hearing me all right?
Okay, sound good right now. It's momentarily little lapses, but I think it's good enough.
Okay. Well, silly storms coming through, and I do sincerely apologize for that. Nothing I can do about that one. But so the last this one here on the screen, Power BI charts and Office documents, being able to insert in, and this is a roadmap item, into more things, whether it's into OneNote, into Word, into Teams, just directly being able to get a chart and take it and copy that link to a section, be able to paste directly into that experience, and then be able to click back into the report itself is really powerful as well. We've also built a lot of this stuff into Excel, right? So we have so many users using Excel today. My kids, let's be honest, when they first started, they were trying to push them towards Google Sheets and numbers. Anyway, Microsoft had a chance. In school today, people are learning Excel as young as 3. So here in Texas, that's when they're trying to learn how to do spreadsheets and things of that nature. So why would we not want to bring Power BI more to people who are already using it? So as kids go through school, they're learning Excel. Let's make sure that we're bringing, makes life a lot better and a lot easier. We've also gone ahead and used built scorecards and higher feature, and be able to build all of that directly in. There's a lot of ways. So we can take a link, and we can also leverage other people's goals and metrics, scorecard, roll-up, hierarchy perspective. We get to that point, and all sorts of great stuff around trend lines and due dates and all of that type of stuff as well. It allows us to drive better decisions faster and get to that true insight behind all sorts of data, not just Power BI data, but we can do all of this from Power Platform as well. So as we start to get there, we're doing all sorts of great stuff, not just in the Fabric world, but we're doing all of this back in the Dynamics space as well. Power Platform, all sorts of great things. Power BI is becoming resident in all of them. Personally, my favorite being SharePoint because, well, that's my background and where I came from. So there's the visualization capability right there in the integrate button in SharePoint lists. You're doing the same type of thing in Dynamics. You're doing all that in Power Platform as well. Lots of integrations with Power Apps also. Other things that we have brought to bear recently is being able to truly streamline getting people into Power BI apps. And we're making it so that it's a lot easier so that we can have people create apps and then actually update them on the backside. A lot of people are leveraging an app-only experience where they never go in and just take a look at a specific report, but instead they're looking at a crafted app for their organization, which is backed by data in their own organization that's been created for them and pushed to them, and they're able to get to that information and keep it up to date. They're able to ask for changes to those apps, and those things can get pushed out seamlessly on the backside to them as well. We also have the capability now of doing B2B sharing and discoverability so that if you're collaborating with another company, you're able to share insights with them, and they're able to discover in your organization, in your tenant, what things that they need to be able to see, things that you've given them rights to see. Now, we don't just willy-nilly give everybody access to everything. You do have to have rights in order to be able to get to the data, but once you've granted the rights to the people who need to be able to see the information, they get to it in a seamless manner. We're also now including Office, including Power BI Desktop as a part of the Office installer for all of the E SKUs. I think we're E3 and above, E3, E5, because E1 doesn't get any apps installed. So with that, I want to take a quick pause, and we're going to do a transition away from more of the glossy, and I want to get back to talking about the down level of what is Power BI. So I'm going to take a quick drink. How are we doing on the sound?
At the moment, it's good. I took you off camera. It may be actually a good idea to just disable the camera on your side. That could impact it a little bit.
That's even better for everybody. So
Yeah. Not your fault, Jason. It happens. But yeah, right at the moment, it's going okay.
All good. I have a face for radio, so we're all good on that one on my side. So as long as y'all can hear me, that's really what's important. So I want to jump ahead a little bit. So let's talk about the components of Power BI. Right. From a Power BI components perspective, the Power BI service, and again, now we're going into Fabric. So I'm going to still focus on this as a Power BI thing because that's what I was asked to do. So I pulled some of my slides I talk on a regular basis about. And inside of the Power BI service is how we're actually going off and consuming reports. It's how we're doing report creation and editing. We have inside of the Power BI service, and again, now it's Fabric, right? So we have a little bit of a change to some of the things I'm going to talk about, where it's not just the Power BI artifacts showing up, but also now if you go off and light up your trial today for Fabric, you're going to get all the Fabric assets coming in as well. But if you're not doing that and you're on a Power BI Pro license, or if you have a Power BI capacity, what you're going to find is you're going to find these standard Power BI workspaces. And inside of that, you're going to find Power BI data sets. You're going to find dashboards and data flows. You're going to find data marts. You're going to find apps, all of those things inside of the Power BI service. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. I'll show that off a little bit. We also have the Power BI mobile app, which again, light, report consumption, and you have light editing capability happening there. Personally, I love to be able to send a screenshot off to somebody and say, what's with this number? Do a little circle on the screen and fire it back off to people. Power BI Desktop really is still the workhorse for us. It's where we do all of our ETL. That extract, transform, and load, that Power Query everything, as my good friend Alex Powers likes to say, and I believe he's in the chat somewhere out there. But be able to go off and really do transformation. And one of the things I like to talk about with people is everybody's always asking me, like, Jason, I've got all this data over in this data source, and I've got data in this data source, I've got data in Salesforce, I've got data in Teradata, I've got data in on-prem, and how does that now become Power BI data? Well, we do this extract, transform, and load function. And once we have it, it's now Power BI data. So it no longer is something that we have to worry about. What's the format? What's it coming in as? Once we get it in, it's something that we can now work with. And so we have the ability to now create those data sets from that ETL function. And then we do report creation on top of that. And we're able to then publish that report into the Power BI service from Power BI Desktop. Other things that we can do with Power BI Desktop now is go off and open those files from OneDrive and SharePoint locations and be able to save them back directly into the service and be able to collaborate on those instantly as we make changes. So you can have somebody taking a look at the viewer, do a refresh of the screen after you hit save on that into your OneDrive or SharePoint location, and now they're able to visualize that change that you just made in Power BI Desktop instantaneously without any lag. Next, we also have Power BI Report Builder. For those of you who've been doing data for a long time, and I know that there's a mix of folks who are intro, and you have a mix of folks who have been doing this for 20 years. Power BI has been doing this paginated reports thing for, golly, it's been about 2.5 years now, I think. But it was our on-prem SSRS, that SQL Server Reporting Services, got lifted and enhanced into the cloud. And we get to do our paginated report creation, both with Power BI Report Builder, which is the desktop tool, and also a function called Formatted Tables in the Power BI service now, which is really great. Next, we have Excel, which I've talked a little bit about. I'm not going to delve into Excel too much, but we have the ability to go off and visualize that data from Power BI data sets. And lastly, we do have the on-premises data gateway, which allows us to get to data in both on-premises data sources as well as other cloud data sources that may not be native to Power BI into the service where we can't just naturally get at it. So before I go on, I want to make sure I don't have any big questions sitting out here. I see there are a couple of things that are sitting here in the starred. And I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple of these real quick. That I do see that there's a statement of Intergalactic by Beastie Boys. I don't know what that one's about, but love the song. It's pretty spectacular. What's the difference between Q&A and Copilot? Q&A is a function that exists in Power BI today. And Copilot is a large learning model that we get to later on. But the big difference between the two is the large learning model functionality versus the Q&A looking just at the data set itself. That you're not able to go across data sets with Q&A in that particular situation. So and then will we ever be able to use Power BI data sets as Excel tables instead of just pivot tables? One, I'm going to have to defer that question for right now. And come back to it. So I don't quite know what I see a bunch of Power Query everything's here. Glad to hear it. All right, so I'm going to jump back over and keep going here. I want to talk a little bit about workspaces, and I'm going to at this point start to flow back and forth between the service and my presentation. But workspaces, this gives us that capability. So for my SharePoint friends out there, the way I think of workspaces is site collections. It's that sort of site collection boundary. It's our security boundary. It's our container of all of the assets and things that we're working with inside of a security boundary, right? So we have a collection of artifacts that we can publish into a specific workspace. Now, in order to use workspaces other than the My Workspace, you do have to have a pro license or be using premium per user or a premium bag capacity that backs your workspace. So there are a couple of different models for that. So this is really about sharing. So workspaces give us that capability to do it. It also underpins our Power BI apps because the way that we create a Power BI app is we actually publish it from a workspace, selecting the assets that we want to become available to that Power BI app. And then we're able to make the changes in the workspace, which is security constrained differently from the app. And we're actually able to then republish from the workspace. But inside of that workspace, we do have our reports, our dashboards, our data sets, all the data flows and data marts and Power BI metrics are there as well. Again, security trimmed down to what people should be able to see. Now, what's a data set? Because I've mentioned this a number of times. We've talked about it, over time as a data model. We've talked about it as a Power Pivot model. We've talked about it as an analysis services tabular model. We've talked about it as a BI semantic model. Lots of different names for the same thing. This is a cached data with aggregated functions on top of it at its core. And this exists in the service, or you can also have it existing on-prem in analysis services if you're leveraging Power BI Report Server. But your data set is this tabular mode, as we used to call it in the Power Pivot days, data set, which is this cached set of data. Now, Power BI dashboards, and Power BI dashboards are a different thing than reports. And a lot of people get things a little bit conflated and confused. And it really, from a semantics perspective, doesn't make much of a difference to the average user. But what a dashboard in Power BI is a little bit different than what everybody really usually thinks about it as. What a dashboard is when you go into a report, you can pin a tile or a visual from a Power BI report to a dashboard that exists inside of the workspace because it's scoped to that workspace and is only created in the browser. So I have the ability to go in, and this is really designed for personalization. It's designed for you to be able to access what you want to over what somebody else may be interested in. So I can go in and I can create a dashboard that's specifically for myself, or I can create one for the executive leadership team with specific information from 15 different reports that they care about that pin all those 15 visuals to a single place. And that way, when they see it, they can come in. When they come in, they take a look. And generally what I refer to a dashboard as is 3 seconds and out. So if I'm taking a look at it and I can come to my dashboard and I glance at it and I go, ooh, there's something funky about that number. Let me drill in. If I click on it, it's going to take me back to the backing report. So that's the difference here. When we create Power BI reports, they are the full fidelity report. A dashboard contains elements of reports. So I talked about the ETL process a little bit, and I want to talk about what data flows are. And I think Brad probably did justice to this earlier, so I'm probably not going to spend too much time on it. But this is reusable ETL. So this is something that's going to exist in the Power BI service, where you're going to go off and you're going to specify what data you want to get, what data you want to do with that data, and then you're going to go ahead and publish that reusable ETL out into the service, which you are able to go off and schedule refreshes of. And it's all done through Power Query Online. Again, that Power Query everything mentality, this is the beginnings of a lot of foundational stuff, especially as we move forward into Fabric. But data flows really give us that shape of data that we publish the data from different sources after transformation into a space in the Power BI service that can then be picked up and done things with. So we are able to go off and create data flows that then feed data marts. And what data marts are is it starts with a data flow, and we get an auto-generated data set on top of it, as well as a SQL endpoint that we can talk to, where we can do an awful lot more to that data. Now, this does work with in-service modeling, so we're actually able to do true data modeling in the web. This was the first time we were able to do that. We're able to do it in more places now, but that really was that first step into that experience, and we're able to do an awful lot with it. Now, I mentioned Power BI apps already, and this one, there are two different types of Power BI apps. There are organizational apps, and then there are ISV created apps, really focused in on the organizational apps over the ISV apps. You can go off and you can find ISV apps out there in the store and be able to instantiate them. In that situation, you're probably going to have to provide some information. As you know, most of them, you're going to have data with that service already, but it's nice because they're able to publish what they think is a really good solution for you from a reporting perspective against data that you have in their service, and be able to go from there. Now, what Power BI apps, I've talked about this a little bit already, distribution of workspace assets. And we're able to security trim them in a different way from the workspace. So we're able to segment that and separate it so that development can continue on that app even after we've published it. The app gets its own unique security model. So we're able to push out different apps to different people and really be able to do it up the right way. We also get the ability to have custom navigation and really go to town on this and make it exactly what we need it to be. There's a whole lot more that we have published into the Power BI apps space. I highly recommend you taking a look at it if this is something that you're going down the path of. Now, I talked a little bit about Power BI Desktop. Power BI Desktop is, today, and I say today because this is actually changing with the next version of Desktop. It's already been announced. We talked about it at Build. And I got permission from the PM in charge of this to mention it and even potentially to demo. But we actually are going to be adding a new format for Power BI desktop files as well. Today, it's a PBIX file. We're also going to have a new source control version, which is going to be a PBIP file, which is a Power BI project. And we're going to get to the point where we're really able to do true Git integration with Power BI. Really great stuff. We're moving from the TIMSL model to the TIMDL model. For the back-end data modeling, we're still using the JSON format for the reports, but this really is breaking things down. So we're moving out of the BIM file world and into this new file format, which instead of having one big file, we're going to have it broken down, which is going to be really nice for those folks that are trying to use Azure DevOps. And as you move forward into Fabric, you will find that there's Git integration with Fabric, and it's really just very seamless and awesome stuff there. But Power BI Desktop is that design surface for us with Power BI, and we're able to build our queries. We're able to build or connect up to data sets. And if you connect up to a data set, you're not able to model, do any more modeling of that data set. But if the model is already there, and let's say that your IT department creates a set of data sets for you that you want to be able to leverage, they can publish them and then allow you to make connection to it. And you don't need access to the data model at that point to be able to do any more modeling. You're just going to leverage the data set that's there. You're going to take the refreshes that come, and that's going to be fantastic for you because it's already done. And all you have to do is take that and build out the reports that you want to build. So once leveraging Power BI Desktop, we do have the ability to go ahead and publish into the Power BI service. And again, this does not include dashboards. These are all Power BI reports. And I mentioned that for a reason. I like to make sure that people know that once they're done with a session, with me, that they know what they're going off and binging for at the end, right? Because I'm only able to give you about an hour's worth of information, and that's not going to be nearly enough for you to really be able to go off and become an expert. And that's where people like, folks like Pragmatic Works come in. But between now and when you take that class, you're going to want to search for the right thing. I want to make sure you know it. So looks like there are a couple more comments and questions in here. What is the difference between Power Query and data flow other than the second sits outside of Power BI or reporting software? So Power Query is the engine that underpins data flows. It exists not only in Power BI, but it also exists in Excel. It also exists over in several other areas of Microsoft at this point. Power Query sort of stands up on its own. And if I'm not mistaken, we actually have a top-level domain for powerquery.microsoft.com where you can stay up to date on all the new things that are happening there. If I'm not mistaken, it also exists over in Power Platform, in the Power Apps and world as well, as I think Dynamics now has a version of it as well. So hopefully I answered Juan's question there. There we go. Thank you for popping that in. I'm going to keep on flowing through the deck because I do want to get to a couple of demos here also. Now, how about that? My next slide up was Power Query. So we have the ability to connect up to many different data sources and do this data transformation. We have the ability to combine multiple queries into a single data set. So if I want to pull in data from 15 different sources and mash it all together, and I'll give you an example of things that I used to do in my previous world before I joined Microsoft. I was at one of the big four accounting firms, and we didn't get access into HR data very often. HR data was very segmented, and you had to have specific data that you only got rights to certain things. So we wanted to make sure that we got that data, we did the right things with it. So we were able to mash that data up with other financial system data, with other reporting data, and be able to actually put together the right type of information so that we were staying within the guidelines, staying within the boundaries of the rules on PII, the rules on data, and things of that nature. So we were able to make sure that we did all of that. The only way to deal with that is to make sure that you are securing that data in place and making sure that when you actually pull it in and you do the transformation, that you're able to hide the stuff that you need to hide and give people access. So we used Power Query in order to do that, leveraging a data flow. So we're able to allow people to connect up to that information, and we refresh that on a monthly or a weekly basis, and people who were able to come in, connect up to that, and get only the data that they were allowed to access. And we were able to obfuscate and secure the information in the right way. The really cool thing about Power Query, though, is that it's refreshable. And that's what's really important, is it's not a one-time deal. One-time transformation is throwaway, and that's a waste of time. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is something that makes the world better in your data world, and that what we're doing is something that just you do it one time, and now it just becomes the thing that happens every single time. That on a scheduled basis, that data is done, that same thing is done to it, so we don't have to walk back through. I've seen processes that used to take 2 months to do come down to under a day. That's really what the power of Power Query is that improvement, that speed, that function, to make sure that we're looking at things in the right way and we're getting the data refreshable and out there. A couple of advanced functionality, pieces of advanced functionality that we have inside of Power Query is the ability to write parameters, to create functions, to reference queries, and leverage the advanced editor. Huge fan of the advanced editor because I like to write my own when it comes to Power Query and write my own M, but I'm a giant geek that way. Now, when we do our modeling, and I'm going to invoke, the name of another Microsoft person, Matthew Roche likes to say that we want to deal with data as far upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary. And so if we can push the transformation all the way back to the data source, fantastic. Let's pull across as little data as possible. Let's do it as much as we can before we get it into Power BI. But when we need to deal with it in the ETL function, then we're going to leverage Power Query for that, because we want to be able to do that as infrequently as possible. We want to do that data transformation so that it's done in the model, so that the model that's presented to the end user is seamless. Because when we get to our DAX side of the world here, we're going to do calculations across columns, and we're going to do calculated columns, we're going to do calculated measures. But every time we hit one of these, we're paying the tax of it doing the calculation against the data set itself, as opposed to the origination data set. So we're seeing that more on the end user side of the world than we are on the origination side and in the system itself. We have the ability to do all sorts of calculations. We can do data categorization, custom sorting, and we perform operations across rows as opposed to across columns, which is what we do in the previous set. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're getting to a point where we're starting to put new visuals out there in the world, but the visuals that you're going to see in desktop are exactly the same visuals that you're going to see in the service. And we have 48 out-of-the-box visuals, but we also have a store out there where either you can roll your own. There's this thing called Charticulator you can do Deneb. There's all sorts of great stuff that you can do on your own, or you can go out and you can get third-party visuals as well, some of which are certified by Microsoft and others that are not. But some of them are paid for, some of them are free. But with the out-of-the-box visuals, you're going to get cross-filtering and drill down. But using a D3 JavaScript library, you can create your own open source visuals. And when you publish them from the server, from desktop into the service, the visuals are all the same. I mentioned filtering. You have 3 levels of filtering at the different scopes. We have filtering at the visual level, we have filtering at the page level, and we have filtering at the report level. Now, I've seen people run into a lot of problems with this where they go and they want to filter on a visual and they're filtering all these things out, but the rest of the page still shows all of the data. And that can get a little bit muddy. So that's why looking at things from a page level, or especially at a report level, oftentimes is a better way to go. So we're able to take a look and, there's a filter pane where you can specify which level you want to do the filtering at. Please understand that filtering is not available in Anonymous, which I encourage you not to use anyway. Anonymous can be really dangerous unless you're working with public data, which at that point it's fine. But if you are working with corporate data, do not use the anonymous mode. I've heard lots of people trying to get around licensing, leveraging Anonymous, and it's just a bad idea because I've seen people lose their jobs for publishing corporate data to Anonymous, thinking that nobody'd be able to find it. All you have to do is go out to Bing, and you can find data out there that people have published. Now, I mentioned mobile a couple of times, so I'm going to go ahead and skip past this slide. I do want to point out a couple of different reporting services. I mentioned I was a SharePoint guy. Been doing Teams since its inception. I did mention, from a reporting surfaces perspective, this new Visualize in Power BI functionality against SharePoint lists. Power BI is the runtime engine, but really this stuff is being stored in a hidden list and in a hidden workspace. You don't get access to it, and reports are interesting for people to be able to take a look at, but they generally are going to need more. It's really a good gateway entry point for people as they start learning about Power BI, but really we want to make sure that we leverage the Power BI service and leverage Power BI desktop as quickly as possible once we get people interested here, because data is only refreshed every 3 hours. And for me, this is a problem because if I go in, I think I'm going to change something in the list and then immediately go visualize it in Power BI in the report, it doesn't come across the same way. Complex field types are not supported here. We don't get the ability to do any Power Query. There's no modeling. And again, it lives in a hidden workspace. And John actually wrote a decent blog post about that. So that's here in the slides as well. So from a SharePoint perspective, because I've mentioned it a number of times, we have different ways that we can get data with SharePoint. Again, I'm going to make sure this deck is made available later. But really, Power Query and SharePoint data going against SharePoint lists, SharePoint online lists, and if you have, and the difference there being if you're in a SharePoint on-prem world and you're using the data gateway versus SharePoint folders, which allows you to pull in and aggregate data together. If you have the same schema, you can pull a whole bunch of stuff in, aggregate it, leveraging Power Query. Really cool stuff. And a lot of great things that you can do leveraging data out of a SharePoint folder. Today, I'd argue probably a better idea to be looking at Fabric if you're going down that direction. However, not a bad way to go still as well. There are helpers for complex SharePoint field types. You're going to want to use the list v1 versus the v2 if you're trying to leverage that when you go off and do the connector. But you also can work with on-premises data gateway and on-prem data sources in this fashion as well. Leveraging Teams, we have all sorts of great stuff happening over in Teams these days, and this is just scratching the surface with it. But we have the ability to go off and visualize in a tab. All of this is client-side rendered, so it's all happening on the client side. It's pulling in the reports, and it's visualizing in Teams. You do have to have viewer access in order to be able to visualize the reports, and you do have to have a license for Power BI in order to be able to do this. It does also integrate into the new conversations functionality as well. From a Teams chat perspective, you're going to be able to visualize these things in the chat. You have adaptive card capability, all sorts of really cool stuff. And from a SharePoint perspective, we also have the ability now, as I mentioned before, to view reports in OneDrive and SharePoint, save into document libraries with absolutely no refresh required. Lots of cool stuff here that we get the ability to do. Let's see if I get an opportunity to demo that for you here in just a minute. We do also still have the Power BI web part for SharePoint. So if you're a SharePoint person, you're trying to leverage Power BI, you want to be able to show a report right on a page instead of having somebody have to go over to Teams and click into a tab. We have the ability to do that. We grab that the Power BI web part app, the URL from the service, and we're able to go off and leverage that using the SharePoint web part. And we also, even in SharePoint Classic mode, we can use the secure embed functionality, whether you're on-prem or in SharePoint Online, in the Classic or Modern sites. So that's the end of my deck. And now I get to do some demo, which I'm very excited for. I want to stop and see if we have any questions. How's my sound? Are we sounding okay?
Yeah, you're coming through good. Actually, it seemed like when we took the camera off, everything went well. Can I throw you a question here?
Of course.
So this is less of a question, and I don't mean to pick on anybody, but I think it's a little bit of a misconception about Fabric that would be really cool for you to address. Let me pop this one up on the screen. Again, not to pick on anybody, but the statement there was Fabric is nothing new, just a bundle of existing products. Can you talk to that a little bit, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So that's actually completely incorrect, unfortunately. And I hate to have to correct somebody like that, but Fabric is absolutely something new. We have completely SaaSified the stack. It is no longer something you have to go manually spin up a whole bunch of different services. You don't have to go worry about spinning up storage accounts and all of these other things. What we've done is we've actually done a very large rewrite in order to make this all work together. And it actually works together. So we're no longer having to worry about the security boundaries of, oh, well, now I've got to go add security groups into this thing or security groups into that thing. I now am able to leverage all of it, leveraging the workspaces model that I mentioned before. So if you're working with a lakehouse, if you're working with a data warehouse, if you're working with notebooks, those assets actually show up inside the Fabric workspaces. So it's a very different model than it was before. So it is different. It's definitely something worth going off investigating. The good thing is that And the thing that I'll agree with you on is, yes, we didn't release anything that was so brand new that you're not familiar with it. If you've been looking at these things before, if you were looking at Synapse before, it's going to be very familiar. If you were looking at Data Factory before, it's going to look very familiar. All of these things have been out there, but we've done a massive amount of work to make sure that all of these things work seamlessly together. It's no longer well, that lives over there. I can't access that information without having to jump through 97 hoops and do all of these different things. It really does make a huge difference and makes the ease of use dramatically different. So any other questions you wanted to hit on, Devin?
We did have a bunch, but I think I know you want to get a demo in, so let's hand it back to you to do that.
All right, cool. So, well, you know what? Let's just pop right in and let's go play a little bit with Fabric. So I know that there was a demo before. And I'm writing my tenant here. Let's go ahead and close a couple things down. Let's see. Do I want to discard changes? Sure, we'll close and discard some changes. I have no idea what I just discarded, but it's going to be fun. So I talked about Power BI, and right now I'm in the Power BI experience. And I don't know exactly what Brad was demoing before, but for me, the personas functionality is really important. It's a completely different experience than we've had before. And it is something you want to, think about a little bit where your starting point is. And for me, Power BI generally is my starting point. So I come in and I take a look, and that's where I am. So here I can take a look at all the different pieces under Synapse. I can take a look at the data factory patterns here as well. But for me, again, I'm starting in Power BI, but if I want to create something new and I don't want to have to think about where do I have to go, the really nice thing is that when I come in, I actually get the ability to just go all of the different Fabric assets that I can create and go ahead and leverage that. So I'm not having to jump around and think, do I have to jump to this persona to go off and create a lakehouse or to create a data flows Gen 2 or any of these things? I can leverage it right in place and go off and do it. Now, as I come down here, I can go in and I can take a look at the OneLake Data Hub here, and I can find all of my data assets. Here's my data, and I can take all the different pieces that I've been creating and been working with. I can also take a look at the endorsed in my org assets as well. So a lot easier to find things now. Also, this new cool monitoring hub, I'm not going to have time to delve into, but I'm excited by it. The other thing here, yes, I agree, Anna. The new icons without color is I won't say awful. It's on product team members' baby's ugly, but I'm not a big fan of it. I'm a fan of color, and I've heard rumors that we're thinking about making some changes there, and hopefully that'll happen. So I've already pinned. By the way, new functionality that happened in Power BI just about a month ago is I have the ability to go in and pin workspaces. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this workspace. It's my Jason Cat workspace. It's Jason, I thought about naming it Jason Cat 2 because I have 2 cats, but I only went with 1. But in here, you can take a look, and I have a whole bunch of different things, and I agree. It'd be really nice if this was yellow, and I could just easily go in and see it. But let's take a look at what I have here. So I have a data flow. I have some lakehouse staging stuff that got created automatically. I've created a warehouse, a SQL endpoint coming off of my lakehouse. And let's just go ahead and get started by playing around with my lakehouse first. What I've done here, and you know what? I want to show this to you. Let's pop over here. I'm going to come into a different tenant because I think this is worthwhile showing. Now, you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I'm a fitness guy. Yeah, I'll let you laugh for a second. For me, I go to the gym almost every morning, and I go to Orange Theory Fitness. And so I get a whole bunch of data that comes in every single day, and I like to track it. I like to take a look at what my splats were like and all sorts of other things. And being a SharePoint guy, what do? I suck all that data into a SharePoint list. It comes into my Gmail account. I have a little service that goes ahead and strips that HTML email out, leverages Power Automate, shoves this data into a SharePoint list, and off to the races I go. So I can go off and create my own report. Now, from here, I could come in and I could go to integrate, and I can go into Power BI and visualize the list. But again, not really interested in doing that. But because I wanted to play with some Fabric data, what I did was I came in here and I went and I said, you know what? Let me export this to a CSV, because number one, I want to do it in a different tenant to begin with. But secondarily, I want to really play with this data in a different way. I want to load data into my lakehouse. So what I did was I went ahead and I pulled that data in. I dropped it into workouts.csv, and I went ahead and I created, if I come back in here and take a look at my workspace, I created a data flow. It should spin up nice and quick. Alex told me this was going to be fast. So I created a data flow Gen 2, and what you will see here, as soon as it pops up, and the other thing I can do is I can actually come over here and I will show it to you in a different way. Now there it goes. Always have back on the new view. Also, whoop. Hopefully y'all are seeing my screen. It just looked like it blinked out for a second there.
Yeah, Jason, I'm going to go ahead and pause you. Just I guess as soon as we jumped into demo, we lost connection as well. So no worries there. It looks like too much stress on the machine there. Do you mind if we do another one or two questions to kind of wrap up? I'm sorry to interrupt your demo there.
Absolutely. Have at it. No worries.
Okay, perfect. So first question I'll kind of throw your way. This was early on in the session, so take yourself back to about 10 minutes in. But question was, what's the difference between Q&A and Copilot?
Yeah, I think I actually answered that one already.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Hey,
All right.
Yeah, I'd seen that one. That was the one that I answered earlier. Yeah, that was the one where it was, yeah.
Perfect. No worries. And then Camille asked, do we need to think about safety with our visuals? I think this was in the context of when you were talking about custom visuals, thinking about them connecting outside of the organization, I think is kind of the context there.
Okay. So safety with the visuals. So from a visuals perspective, things that are published into the store, I would take a look for ones personally that are, certified by Microsoft, because those are, obviously ones that we have looked at and said, yeah, this is acceptable. This is okay. So that's the way that I would think about it from a safety perspective. What is safe in today's digital world? Vigilance is key. So personally, I'd go that route, and I'd say, definitely be cautious over gallant.
Awesome. Well, Mitchell, I'm going to hand it to you. I know we got a giveaway that I'll let you take, and I'm going to jump into our final session of the day. Jason, thank you so much for presenting. It was a great session, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sorry for all this difficulties. I don't know what's going on, but
it was good. I got actually another question here, Jason. Will desktop ever have the ability to do updates from within the app instead of having to download and install the new EXE? And I think the question there is, hey, can I do all of my development from the service?
So let's see if I can answer the question the right way. So today, what you're able to go off and do right now is go and open from OneDrive and SharePoint, right? So that's brand new functionality that we just brought out. You are going to have to go into Files, Options, and Settings, Options, and actually go in and turn that on. Plus, there is a tenant level thing that you have to do in order to make that something that works. But that, when you go off and you select Open from a OneDrive SharePoint location, you're saving back to that file location. You're not actually saving it local. So you are streaming those bits back and forth. So, and again, we're talking about developer mode. That functionality, a little bit of a different kind of a thing. So I want to wait until there's some answers that are coming out around developer mode that I think are going to help with that. I can tell you that, the Azure DevOps functionality coming in from a Fabric perspective, lots of great stuff. We can see about putting in the chat the blog announcement that came out about that. It just came out last week, I believe. Nimrod posted something just last week on the Git functionality that we're releasing coming up here shortly with the next version of the desktop.
All right, awesome. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of, I have a feeling, exciting stuff coming out around Power BI Desktop in regards to that. So one more quick thing. I think this is a really great question. How does the integration of Data Factory into Fabric, specifically Data Flows Gen 2, I think, affect Power Query with Power BI? What's the difference? When would I use one versus the other?
So the question is, when would I use Data Flows Gen 2 versus Power Query in Power BI Desktop?
I think so, yeah.
Well, so the more that you can start to do in Power BI online and the service, the better off I think you're going to be. Because one of the things that happens when you create a data flow Gen 2 is it becomes reusable for everybody, right? So it's something that anybody can go off and connect up to at that point, take a look at it, and actually leverage that functionality. That's one of the great things about data flows. I think that the promise of it is fantastic. The Lakehouse functionality, direct lake mode is absolutely one of the coolest things out there. Keeping in mind, folks, that we are in public preview at this point, and there's so much more to come before we get to general availability. This stuff has been out there for less than a month, so you may find some rough edges. But I think you're going to find it gets a lot smoother as we get a lot further along in this towards general availability. As far as I'm concerned, I'm starting to build out more and more Data Flows Gen 2 than I am in file Power Query.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jason, there was a little bit of a breakup there with the interaction during the session, but I thought overall it was an awesome session. Thank you so much for joining us today. I learned some cool stuff in there. And I think that going forward, we're going to hear a lot of great stuff. So for the big reveal, I know we're going to give away an on-demand learning pass. Then we're going to move on to the next session. Again, Jason, thank you so much for just helping us out. We appreciate it. So the winner here is Intergalactic Beastie Boys by Gianna Sanchez. Congratulations to Gianna. I'm not quite sure how that works for communication there, but I guess email us or we'll reach out. I wasn't told about that part there, but thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you in the next session.